Hello, good evening and welcome. This is Biz1st Review 360 and I am Jama Ratnayaka. Now this week we saw the sharp raising of taxes on small Japanese hybrid vehicles and the government looking to invite international oil and gas multinational companies to explore for hydrocarbon deposits in Mana and Kueri Basin. These are our top stories for this week.
The Monetary Board of the Central Bank kept policy rates unchanged at the 5th Monetary Policy Review for 2018, saying an economic recovery is expected in the second quarter of the year and inflation is expected to be around the high side to 4 to 6%. The Central Bank said the onset of the harvest towards the end of the third quarter in 2018 will help reduce inflation. Accordingly, the standing deposit facility rate and the standing lending facility rate of the Central Bank will remain 7.25% and 8.50% respectively. The rupee depreciated 4.2% this year against the US dollar, driving prices up.
The government is looking to invite international oil and gas companies to explore for hydrocarbon deposits in the Mana and northern Kaveri basins. The Cabinet of Ministers approved a proposal by Arjuna Ranathunga, Minister of Petroleum Resources Development, to call for bids from international petroleum companies. Initial studies revealed potential for oil and natural gas exploration in Mana and Kaveri basins.
The Ceylon Motor Traders Association, releasing a communique, said that they understand why the government raised taxes to curb imports of small cars, but called for a dialogue on long-term policies to reduce uncertainty among industry and consumers alike. Finance Minister Mangala Samaravira said the importation of small vehicles to the island has become a tsunami.
One of the reasons is the pressure we had on the exchange rate. But also we have to realize that the Sri Lankan roads cannot really afford so many cars anymore. That is also something which we had to take into account, because if this continued at this rate, I'm sure Sri Lanka will end up be like Bangkok in the 90s, where you had huge traffic jams even at midnight. So I think there has to come a time when we have to be aware of all the other area, the kind of congestion this policy was creating. But at the same time, as I kept saying, we ensured that it still is a better value than it was before.
Minister Samaravira said that the central bank had requested an import duty hike on vehicles with engine capacities less than 1000 cc.
On the trade deficit, actually over the first 5 months has worsened by about $716 million US. Of that amount, 350 million can be attributed to the increase in vehicle imports. So pretty much half the deterioration in the trade account was accounted for by vehicle imports. I see all of you reported in the last day or two that the central bank wanted something done about it, and that is why we wanted something done about it, because this deterioration in the trade deficit had to be addressed. Because when the trade deficit deteriorates so much and the current account of the balance of payments deteriorates, we have to borrow more from abroad. That is one. And as the balance of payments gets worse, there is pressure on the exchange rate. ඒක තමයි පොදු කට්ටියට exchange rate එක depreciate වුණාම ඒක හරි problem එකක් තියෙනවා in terms of the cost of living. I think you have to do something when the trade balance deteriorates as quickly as it has done in the first 5 months of this year. It's in the interest of everybody, particularly the poor and vulnerable, to make sure that deterioration is arrested, so that the decline in the balance of payments does not lead to pressure on the exchange rate. That's one thing.
Stay tuned. We will be back with a discussion on the challenges faced by the construction industry. Welcome back to Biz1st Review 360. Is a boom in the construction industry creating a bubble in the real estate market? We are joined by Engineer Ranjit Gunatilaka, the President of the Chamber of Construction Industry Sri Lanka. Nadim, it's over to you.
Thank you, Jamal. Amid growing concerns from many quarters about the future of the construction industry, we thought it would be appropriate or the opportune time to sit down with industry experts and find out what exactly is going on. So joining us this evening, we have Mr. Ranjit Gunathilaka, President of the Chamber of Construction Industry. Mr. Gunathilaka, thank you very much for speaking to the review. Let me start off by asking, we saw the central bank say in recent times that they're going to keep an eye on the property market. We've heard concerns from others who say that property prices are highly overvalued and that it is artificial inflation. Is there a crisis in the construction industry? Is there a bubble, or is this fear-mongering?
I know sometimes back the central bank governor mentions certain things, but later he himself said what he meant was not properly communicated. And the second thing is the property development is not construction industry. It's a very minute area of the whole construction industry. The bubble people feel because when there was nothing has happened for so many years in the country with various issues. Now you can see so many tower cranes, so many structures coming up all over, so that the people think it's bubble. Today in the world, the urbanization, people come into the urban living is everywhere it's happening. For Sri Lankan population, the present situation is not the maximum. I think the present set of apartment, what you are referring to, will continue. And but anyway, all these things are very much connected. Only the apartments development by itself will not work, because most of the apartments, the developers and the buyers, I think not even 20%, 25% buyers who buy them going to live in that.
That's the other sort of issue. When we're talking about these developments, there's a belief among some that the suppliers are not catering to the demand, that the demand is for affordable and middle-income housing, but the supply is consistently on the high end. Is there any truth to that?
Yes, actually today if you take it, I can see the low end, very limited facilities, basic facilities, and middle income. These apartments are not costly, but for the construction itself is costly, because the construction, almost all items what we put in the construction are imported. That is not only the materials I am talking, but the machinery equipment. Today the labor has become is a very scarce, so that is also expensive. Earlier it was the only item is cheap. Today what is cheap in the construction industry, I should say, is the professionalism. The only this country that you can get engineers around 100,000 rupees per month, but all other things are expensive. And I think if you take it real construction cost, I should say at least 40% duties and taxes of what we are using. So no, it will not happen. But if you say no duty, no tax, all this construction industry cost per square foot should come down minimum by 35 to 40%.
When we're talking about middle-income housing and all of these housing projects that are coming up, there are worries about whether the country has the infrastructure to handle all of this, or whether, even if you take the Colombo city for example, does the Colombo city have the infrastructure in terms of drainage and sewage and electricity connections and water connections and enough water pressure from the mains to sustain all of the high-rises that are coming up? Do you think that this is being given enough consideration by players in the construction industry?
No, this is the regulatory bodies should handle this. Now, actually, in the construction industry, if you know, there are about 6 ministries which you can make one ministry, right? When you have 6 ministries, it's very difficult to handle the whole development because it's not a subject here, but we feel it because water is in one sector, sewer is in one sector, then electricity is in one sector, the planning or the infrastructure, other things in another ministry. So it is difficult, but still you can. Your question about all this development, whether the infrastructure has been designed. But people can't see. I can see every day because I'm also working in a construction company. There are a lot of infrastructure activities also happening. I mean, sewerage system, augmentation of water, then power. This is happening. But only thing what is not happening is the expansion of the roads.
So
now,
that's the key issue. Now,
give me 1 second. Yeah. Sorry. Now, what they do is the very old road what we saw about 50, 60 years back. Now most of the roads have become one way, so that people somehow or other manage. But if the number of vehicles and other things urbanize, I mean the people coming from the city going up, then they'll have to do something.
That's actually one of the key issues that I wanted to highlight about roads. I mean, you go to some areas of, you take Colombo 6, or even now in Greater Colombo in the Dehuala Mount Ravinia areas, and even outside, you'll have a 10-foot, maybe 11 or 12-foot wide road with the drains on the sides, and you'll have about 7 or 8 apartment buildings along a 100 or 200 meter stretch. So you can see that that is not sort of sustainable. So how can you remedy this? When you say something needs to be done,
this should be under the central planning and the rules you got to put. There are rules width of the road connected with number of houses, but sometimes practically we can't do it. But I personally see a lot of office residential units have been converted to office space, and people come into the office, they park a lot of vehicles on these sub roads, 20-foot, 12-feet roads. So I think for a moment, if someone can think no residential units can be used for office, then a lot of office development will create in the country, and then there will be further construction. It's good for the construction.
So that's a shortcoming in the regulation, in zoning and in approvals.
But so one got to put very strict rules and follow it up. It's only sometimes no point of having rules and regulations. We can see how many rules and regulations only in the building industry, and how much of rules and regulations are violated and no one is taking action.
So whose responsibility is it to ensure that there are not just willy-nilly rules and regulations, but necessary, that there is a proper regulatory framework, and to enforce that regulatory framework, to make sure that people, contractors or property developers, condominium developers, etc., to ensure that all these people are following these rules? Is it the Ministry of Megapolis and Western Development? Is it the Urban Development Authority, the Road Development Authority? Where does the buck stop?
All are equally responsible. I'll take an example. Now, Construction Industry Development Authority is a government authority. It's a regulatory body. They make the basic rules and regulations. But for various provinces, it is done by municipal councils. But if you take it, Sri Lanka Police, they stop the pillion driver people or the mobile operators going without a helmet. But earlier people, went on bikes without helmet. Now, helmet is a must, police catch. But even construction industry, people should use helmets. But the police or some organizations should go and catch the people who are not using helmets.
Should inspect the construction sites to make sure they have their hard hats and their boots and etc.
Yes, for the safety of the people.
We're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk about the opportunities and the challenges that the construction industry has to gear up for as Sri Lanka moves towards a sustainable future. Welcome back to the review. We're in conversation with Mr. Ranjit Gunathilaka, the President of the Chamber of Construction Industry. We've been talking about the perceived crisis in the construction industry, in property development, etc. And we're also going to focus now on the challenges and the opportunities. Mr. Gunathilaka, when you think of challenges and opportunities, you think Sri Lanka is now, or the government has stated a commitment to opening Sri Lanka up to the world. There's a controversial free trade agreement with Singapore, which was supposed to, or which is hoped that will attract a lot more foreign direct investment into the country. And there are many more such agreements that are in the pipelines. In this sort of atmosphere, where Sri Lanka is now opening up to the world, what are the challenges and the opportunities that you see for the construction industry?
Today, the more that you, because today is a global village concept. So you got to open up to the world. And we have to get a lot of things from the outside Sri Lanka rather than we commit within Sri Lanka. Because all our machinery equipment, Sri Lanka doesn't have any construction machinery equipment factories or anything. We have to get down from outside. 80 to 85% of local materials we are using in the construction industry is imported. So we can't have restriction on that. So only thing is, whether by certain acts, whether the certain provisions, they are little worried whether there will be our way of working will affected by the foreign professionals coming in.
But you're an engineer. Are you worried?
I'm not worried, because why I don't worry is, all countries outside Sri Lanka, engineers are paid very much higher than this. So I don't see any engineers coming to Sri Lanka at a lower price, lower salary. I don't think there's, but unless for some other reason, but it's very rare. But how many engineers of Sri Lanka has gone out for the better, and how much engineers bringing the money or funding their families here? So if we stop, if all the countries stop, how many engineers going to come back? So this is, you have to think of the balanced way. But the only thing is, we have certain professions like architectural professions. When you design something, you should not, you have to design it to suit this country. So if someone's coming from outside and they do their own way, that may affect our industry and the profession. So this has to be carefully done.
Carefully considered and taken into consideration. Do you feel, you mentioned quite correctly that in the construction industry, most of the raw materials, the machinery, etc. that you use is actually imported. 80 to 85%, I think you said. Do you feel that when negotiating trade agreements or when setting up the tariff policy, that the state or the government is paying enough attention to this sector, that the construction industry, to maybe lowering the taxes on what is a vital industry?
No, right from the beginning we told government, take it out these unnecessary taxes, because that doesn't make any sense for the construction cost. Now if you take it, the Indian investors coming here, when they say, okay, square foot rate should be Indian rupees 2,000, in Sri Lanka, in it is Indian rupees, what is 2,000 is becoming about 6,000, about 3 times high.
The square foot rate in Sri Lanka is 3 times higher than in India.
And not only compared to India, even if you are comparing to Singapore, construction cost, not now, even 10-15 years back we have checked, our construction cost is higher than Dubai and Singapore. So we find it very difficult for average person to put up their houses. In the future it will be worse, because if these taxes and duties going to be, if everything is free, people will have, and they can do certain adjustments too at the time of importing at the port. limited taxes, but there are so many taxes, cascading effect, which is affecting the construction industry. If these things are out, we can bring down the cost.
This is a very interesting statistic because it's been estimated that by 2036, for every 100 Sri Lankans, 61 will be dependents because we have an aging population. So there's going to be for every 100 people, there's going to be 39 people working to support 61 people. And in this kind of backdrop, already young families are struggling to become homeowners, to have their first, to build their first home. In this kind of setup, do you see any logic or reasoning in when it comes to policy making? Do you think that successive governments, not just this government, even the previous government, or even the one before that, have taken into consideration these statistics when making policy?
No, as an engineer I'm speaking, I think we are not disciplined in the construction industry. So we got to be disciplined. Second thing, all the countries, if you take it the hierarchy, there are engineers at least involved in the hierarchy in the decision making, policy making. If you see in Sri Lanka, not even 1%. We got engineers in the top, which is not as per India or as per Pakistan or as per China. If you take China, it's more than 75% hierarchy is engineers. Because they are the people who make the policies. They are the people who plan it. But today in Sri Lanka, you and I know what's happening. So that is something lacking which one got to seriously look into. This use our resources the best way, which is not happening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gunathilake.
Thank you very much for coming.
So there you have it, the challenges and opportunities facing not just the construction industry, but Sri Lanka as a whole. We have several policy documents. There's a Vision 2025, there's a Vision 2030, Sustainable Sri Lanka policy document. That's also a national discourse, at least, that's to be had. But when policy is not made in consultation with the appropriate stakeholders, will that policy actually serve the country? A question to think about.
That's all the news we have for you tonight. Until next time, good night and have a wonderful weekend.